the attic. God, I hate attics. But for 6 months, that's where my husband Mark and I had spent every free moment. We bought this huge old Victorian house, a fixer-upper. Our friends called it a money pit, but we saw it as our future. 10 years married, 15 years together since high school. This house was supposed to be the start of our perfect second chapter. Mark was great at the work. He's a structural engineer, so he handled the heavy stuff. I was the one scraping old paint and managing the aesthetic vision. We were a team, always. That's what I told myself. That's what I believed. It was a ridiculously hot Tuesday in August. We were supposed to be clearing the last of the previous owner's junk from the attic before the insulation crew arrived the next day. The air was thick and dusty, and I was sweating through my t-shirt. Mark was downstairs hauling the 10th contractor bag of old carpet. I was in the back corner, near the eaves, where the ceiling slopes down. Shoved behind a rusty water heater, I saw it. Just a simple shoebox. The kind expensive boots come in. I pulled it out. It was taped shut, but the tape was old and brittle. On the lid, someone had written in faded, looping cursive, "Memories do not open." I stood there for a second, feeling guilty. I mean, it wasn't ours. It probably belonged to Mrs. Henderson, the sweet old lady whose estate sold us the house. But Mark was taking forever, and honestly, that label was a challenge. Who labels something like that and expects people not to look? I set the box on the dusty floor and ripped the tape. I opened the lid, expecting to see old Christmas ornaments or black and white photos from the 1940s. What I saw made the blood freeze in my veins. These weren't old photos. These were full color, modern, and they were of Mark. I stared. It was definitely him, but younger, maybe 5 or 6 years ago. Less stress, less gray in the hair. He was genuinely smiling. Not the tired, strained smile I'd gotten used to seeing at the end of a long workday. This was pure, unburdened happiness, and he wasn't alone. The very first photo I saw was a family portrait. Mark was sitting on a bench, his arm wrapped around a woman. She was beautiful, kind of bohemian-looking, with long, dark hair, and she was looking up at Mark with a look of complete, open adoration. The kind of look I hadn't realized was missing from my marriage until I saw it aimed at someone else. But the real shock, the one that made my knees buckle, was the child. A little girl, maybe 3 or 4, with Mark's exact smile. She was sitting on his knee, holding a toy, her eyes crinkling in a mischievous way. My hand started shaking so violently I almost dropped the stack of pictures. I started flipping through them like a madwoman. Mark at the beach, showing the little girl how to build a sandcastle. Mark holding her tiny hand on what looked like her first day of school. A birthday party photo. The cake read, "Happy 5th birthday, Emily." The dates on the back. They weren't old. The newest one was from 18 months ago. 18 months ago, Mark was supposedly in Seattle for a massive business deal. He was gone for 10 days. I remember those 10 days. I was lonely. He was stressed on the phone. All lies. All of it. I tried to rationalize it. A niece? A friend's child? Number. The way he was touching the woman, the easy intimacy in their poses, and then I saw the diamond. In a close-up photo of a park picnic, the woman's left hand was resting on Mark's arm, clear as day, a simple, elegant, solitaire ring and a wedding band. She was married, and it was clear to me who she was married to. It wasn't just an affair. This was a whole life, a parallel universe. I sank onto the dusty floor. My husband was a bigamist, a father. He had another wife, another daughter, named Sarah and Emily. Underneath the photos was a thick stack of letters, tied with twine. I tore off the string and grabbed the top envelope. It was addressed to my dearest M in that looping handwriting. The letter smelled faintly of gardenias. I didn't care about privacy anymore. I ripped it open. My dearest M, I miss you so much. Emily asked when Daddy was coming home today, and I told her soon. It feels like a piece of me is missing when you're away on your business trips. Please try to make it home for the recital. She's wearing the little blue dress you bought her. I know how complicated things are, but sometimes I wish we could just tell everyone. Live our life openly. I love you, and I love our life. Even the parts we have to keep hidden. Yours forever, Sarah Daddy. Business trips, our life. Complicated things. It was all there. 8 years of meticulous lies. He hadn't just cheated. He had built an entire second family during the years we were struggling to maintain ours. He'd told me we couldn't afford a vacation because of the mortgage, but he was funding 2 households. He'd missed my birthday party to be at Emily's recital. The shock was so immense it wiped out the pain. It was replaced by a cold, searing need for proof. I had to know everything. The story wasn't complete. I had to find where this life was happening. I kept reading the letters, looking for any clue, an address, a school name, a location, and finally, I found it. Tucked into the bottom of the box was a crumpled receipt from a dry cleaner. It was recent, just 3 months old, and the address was in a town called Fairfield, about 50 miles north of us. A town Mark never ever mentioned. It all clicked into place. He didn't just forget the box. He used the renovation as a cover to get rid of it. He must have carried it up, intended to burn it or throw it out, and in his exhaustion just shoved it into the darkest corner, forgetting it was there. He was trying to bury his secret, and I had accidentally unearthed it. I quickly put all the evidence back in the shoebox, taped it up, and slid it under our mattress. I had to be careful now. I had to be the unsuspecting wife. I had to act normal until I knew the full extent of the damage. Mark finally came upstairs. He looked tired and sweaty. He gave me a quick, distracted kiss. Rough one, huh? You look exhausted. Too much dust in your lungs? I managed to look him right in his eyes, the eyes that had been lying to me for 8 years. Something like that, Mark. Just a rough day, I forced a smile. That smile was the hardest thing I've ever done, because I knew as I smiled at the man who had demolished my life that tomorrow I was driving to Fairfield. The first thing you lose when you find out your life is a lie is your sanity. Everything becomes a question mark. Every memory, every kiss, every fight, every "I love you" he ever said. I felt like I was watching myself from the ceiling. I was Alice, but I'd fallen down a hole filled not with wonder, but with filth. The day after finding the box, Mark went to work, completely unaware that his wife now knew his most monstrous secret. He kissed me goodbye, told me to order lunch from that new deli we liked, and drove off. I watched his car disappear down the street, and the mask I was wearing finally broke. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just felt a cold, calculated emptiness take over. I wasn't grieving yet. I was strategizing. I had the shoebox under the mattress, the dry cleaner receipt in my pocket, and 8 years of lies swimming in my head. I had to know. I had to see this other life. I told Mark I was meeting a decorator for the house, a perfect, innocent excuse. He didn't blink. That afternoon, I was in my car, driving the 50 miles north to Fairfield, the town listed on the receipt. Fairfield was picturesque, small with a cute little main street and an old town square. It was the kind of place people moved to for a quiet, idyllic family life. The kind of life Mark had always told me we would have someday after the renovations, after the promotions, after life settled down. It turned out he was already living it. I found the dry cleaner easily. It was called Fairfield Cleaners. I pulled up and sat there for a long time just watching. It felt so mundane, a dry cleaner, the stage for this decade-long tragedy. I drove around the block looking for something, anything that felt familiar. A coffee shop he might have mentioned? A park? Nothing. I felt a surge of panic. Maybe the receipt was a fluke. Maybe I was wrong. But then I drove past a small, unassuming elementary school. And on the playground, painted brightly on a banner for the upcoming school festival, was a name: Emily's Annual Field Day. My breath hitched. Emily, the little girl from the pictures, his daughter. I pulled over immediately and parked near a small wooded area across the street. I waited. I didn't know what I was waiting for, but I couldn't leave. I was drawn by a horrible magnetic force. The school bell rang around 3:15 p.m. A sudden explosion of noise, kids screaming, laughing, running for the gates. Parents swarmed the sidewalks. I scanned the faces, my heart pounding so hard I could feel the pulse in my neck. I was looking for her, Sarah, the woman from the photos, and then I saw her. She was standing near the front gate, looking patient and beautiful in a simple sundress. Her long, dark hair was tied back, and she was checking her watch. She looked tired, maybe, but she had that same kind, open expression from the letters, the expression of a woman who was happily married and deeply loved. A moment later, a little girl with bright, messy blonde hair and Mark's exact smirk came barreling into her arms. Emily, Mark's daughter. My legs felt suddenly weak. It was real. It was tangible. Not a grainy photograph, not a flowery letter, but flesh and blood, running into the arms of a woman who thought she was Mark's one and only. I watched them for a solid 10 minutes. Sarah knelt down, fixed Emily's backpack, kissed her cheek, and they started walking toward the parking lot, chatting about the school day. And then, the impossible happened. They didn't walk to a car. They walked down a side street, past a row of charming little bungalows. I started my car and drove slowly, keeping distance. They stopped at a blue house with a white picket fence and a huge porch swing. A swing large enough for a family. Sarah opened the front door with a key, and they disappeared inside. And standing right there on the porch, waiting for them, was Mark, my husband. He was wearing the old college sweatshirt I had bought him, the one he claimed he only wore to lounge around the house in. He scooped Emily up in a huge bear hug, tossing her in the air. The sound of her squealing laughter, a sound I had never heard because he'd never had a child with me, ripped through me. Then he set her down, turned to Sarah, and pulled her in for a long, tender kiss. Not a quick peck, a real deep, homecoming kiss. The kiss of a man who was thrilled to be home with his family. I put my hand over my mouth to stifle a cry. It felt like I'd been shot. The betrayal wasn't the affair, the betrayal was the life. The perfect, domestic, utterly complete life he had built 50 miles away. He was a dad. He was a husband. He was theirs. And I was the renovation project, the dusty attic memory he visited when he had time. I slammed the gear into reverse and tore out of there, tears finally blurring my vision. I drove blindly, just aiming the car south, away from that blue house, away from the laughter, away from the lie. When I got home, the house was silent and empty. The dust and the renovation debris suddenly felt symbolic. My life was debris. I knew I couldn't confront him yet. I needed absolute proof, the kind that would hold up in a court of law, because this wasn't just about my broken heart anymore. This was about 8 years of financial secrets, of emotional abuse, of shared assets. I pulled out my laptop, my fingers flying across the keys. I started digging. I found Sarah on Facebook first. Her page was open. I scrolled through years of photos. Mark was blurred out of many of them, hidden, but his presence was implied in every family day at the beach and our annual Christmas card photo. And then I found the wedding photos. They weren't on Sarah's public profile. They were on a private photo sharing site linked to a distant cousin of hers. I used a fake profile and a bit of social engineering, and there they were. Mark in a tuxedo, Sarah in a stunning white dress, a beautiful ceremony. The date, 6 years into our own marriage. He didn't just have a secret family, he was a bigamist. The world went silent. This was no longer a personal tragedy. This was a criminal act. My next step was his work computer. He had a private home office set up in the temporary living room. He always left his desktop open, trusting me implicitly. What an idiot. I spent the night downloading every financial document, every email exchange, every calendar entry I could find. And that's when I found the bank statements, 2 separate checking accounts, 2 separate mortgage payments, 1 house in my name, and 1 mortgage for the house in Fairfield, held under the names Mark and Sarah Peterson. Peterson. My married name was Peterson. He hadn't even bothered to change the last name. He just duplicated the life. I found the lease agreement for a shared mailbox in a different city, a P.O. box he used for communication with Sarah's bank and the school. That's how he kept the mail out of our house. The meticulous planning was staggering, the sheer arrogance of thinking he could pull this off for a lifetime. By the time Mark's car pulled into the driveway the next morning, I had a flash drive filled with enough evidence to burn his entire life to the ground. I put the drive in my pocket, sealed the shoebox back up, and tucked it away. I was ready. But first, I needed one more piece of information. I needed to know why, the confrontation. It was all I could think about. But I knew I couldn't go in blind. The moment I started accusing him, he would become defensive. He would lie. He would manipulate. I needed the truth to be an absolute, undeniable wall around him. So I continued my act. I spent the next 2 days moving like a ghost in my own house. I cooked his favorite meals. I asked about his day. I even initiated sex once. Every touch felt like betrayal. Like I was physically participating in his monstrous lie. But I needed him to be comfortable, secure in his deception. Meanwhile, I was busy constructing my wall of evidence. After downloading all the financial records from his laptop, the 2 mortgages, the separate credit cards, the wire transfers to Sarah's family expenses, I needed to get closer to the source of the lie. I needed to see the 2 worlds collide. I decided to stake out their house in Fairfield. I told Mark I had a massive migraine and needed a dark room. He was actually quite solicitous, bringing me water and Tylenol. The irony was suffocating. I drove back up to Fairfield, parking my car miles away in a grocery store lot, and then walked the rest of the way to the blue house with the picket fence. I needed to be discreet. I found a small coffee shop down the street that had a window overlooking the street leading to their house. Perfect. I sat there for 6 hours, nursing a single lukewarm coffee. I didn't know what I was looking for, but the adrenaline was keeping me wired. Around 5:30 p.m., Sarah and Emily walked up the street. Sarah was carrying groceries. Emily was skipping, chatting excitedly about her day. It was a picture of normal, painfully normal. Then Mark's car pulled up. Not his usual beat-up work truck, but the sleek black sedan he used for client meetings. He parked it in the driveway, jumped out, and hurried to meet them. I watched through the glass as he embraced Sarah, took the heaviest bag of groceries, and ruffled Emily's hair. He looked like a man who had just returned from a long, arduous day, eager to be home with his real family. What broke me that day wasn't the kiss. I'd seen that already. It was what happened next. Emily started showing him a drawing she'd done at school. Mark, my husband, who always gave me a quick, distracted nod when I showed him my renovation plans, actually knelt down on the sidewalk, oblivious to passers-by, and studied the drawing with the focus of a scientist. He asked her detailed questions. He pointed things out. He engaged. He was a present father. That's when the deepest cut landed. It wasn't about the other woman or the money. It was about the time, the energy, the love he had invested in that child, that family, while I was getting the exhausted, cynical leftovers. We wanted children, Mark and I. We tried for years. He always told me, "Honey, it's probably stress. We'll try again once the house is done." He didn't try again because he already had a child. I took out my phone and started discreetly filming. Not for the evidence, I already had that, but for myself. I needed to document the depth of his devotion to them, so that when I finally burned his life down, I wouldn't have any lingering doubts. As they walked inside, I decided I couldn't just leave. I needed a closer look at the inside of the lie. I walked down to the house, pretending to look for a stray dog. I walked right past the picket fence. The front window was open a crack, letting out a faint scent of roasting chicken and the sound of casual, everyday conversation. I heard Emily, "Daddy, can you read me the story about the dragon tonight?" I heard Mark, "Of course, sweetheart." As soon as I finish helping Mommy with dinner. Mark hasn't helped me with dinner in 5 years. I moved slowly, casually past the window, and I looked inside. The living room was warm, filled with light, and lived in. Toys scattered on the rug, a collection of small ceramic mugs on the mantelpiece, photos everywhere. Not staged, professional photos, snapshots. Mark and Sarah kissing under a mistletoe. Mark teaching Emily how to ride a bike. A framed piece of art that Emily had obviously drawn. I love DADDY. It was a home. It was everything our dusty, half-renovated Victorian was supposed to be, but wasn't. I saw Mark, apron tied around his waist, standing by Sarah in a bright, modern kitchen. He was laughing. A full, booming, unreserved laugh. The one I hadn't heard since we were dating. He reached out and touched Sarah's back, a casual, familiar gesture of ownership. It was too much. The picture of domestic bliss was so complete, so perfect, that it made my life look like a terrible joke. I was a spectator to my own husband's happy marriage. I stumbled away from the window, reeling. I didn't drive back home right away. I pulled into a deserted park and sat there until the streetlights came on, just trying to piece together the shattered fragments of my reality. I realized something critical. Mark wasn't maintaining two marriages. He was maintaining one marriage with Sarah and a decade-long elaborate lie with me. I was the mistress in everything but the legal sense. My life was the secret, the inconvenient past he was trying to bury under dust and renovations. I drove home that night with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. The pain was still there, but it was hardened by resolve. I didn't just want a divorce, I wanted justice. I wanted to see him lose everything he cherished, his career, his reputation, and that perfect little blue house. I knew he was due to leave for another business trip next week. This was my chance. I couldn't confront him here, not in this house where he would just shout me down and deny everything. I needed a public stage, a place where his two worlds would collide spectacularly. I decided that his next business trip would take him straight back to Fairfield, but this time, I would be waiting. The next 3 days were the hardest period of emotional performance of my life. I was a spy living behind enemy lines. I had to smile, I had to be affectionate, I had to feign concern for his upcoming business trip to Chicago. "Are you sure you packed enough warm clothes, honey?" I asked, folding a sweater he would never wear in Chicago because he wasn't going to Chicago. He was going to Fairfield. I knew this because I had seen the specific email confirmation for the corporate retreat booking, a 2-day stay at a little boutique hotel in Fairfield, only a mile from the Blue House. A retreat I knew was just an excuse for extra, uninterrupted time with his other family. The morning he left, the tension in the house was so thick I could barely breathe. He gave me a quick hug, a peck on the cheek. "I'll call you tonight, sweetie. Miss you already." He said it so easily, so casually. The lie was second nature to him. I watched him pull out of the driveway, and as soon as his car was out of sight, I went into action. I didn't pack a suitcase. I didn't need clothes. I needed a lawyer. I drove straight to the office of the top divorce attorney in the city, Ms. Eleanor Vance. She specialized in high-net-worth divorces and, crucially, had a reputation for being ruthless. When I sat down in her luxurious office, I placed my flash drive on her desk, along with the shoebox. "I have 8 years of evidence, Ms. Vance," I said, my voice steady, betraying none of the turmoil inside. "My husband, Mark Peterson, is a bigamist. He has a second wife and a child. I want everything he has." Ms. Vance opened the box, looked at the photos, read a few lines of Sarah's letters, and then plugged in the flash drive. Her cool, professional demeanor broke for a second. "Mrs. Peterson, this is extraordinary. We have enough here to utterly demolish his career and his financial standing. And yes, in our state, bigamy is a crime. We will get you everything." The next step of my plan had to happen before the legal papers were served. I needed the final, undeniable moment of public exposure. I left Miss Vance's office and drove to Fairfield. It was Thursday afternoon, the perfect time. I knew from the school schedule I'd secretly checked that Emily had her weekly piano lesson at 4 p.m., which meant Mark would be home alone, waiting for Sarah to bring Emily back. I parked my car 3 streets over and walked to the Blue House. The same white picket fence, the same porch swing, but this time I wasn't just observing. I was walking right up to the front door. My hand was trembling as I raised it to knock. This was it, the moment I set fire to my old life. Mark opened the door wearing a comfortable t-shirt and sweats. He looked relaxed, the Chicago stress completely gone. His easy smile vanished instantly. His eyes went wide, reflecting a mix of horror, disbelief, and immediate sinking dread. "Sarah, what are you doing here?" he stammered, the wrong name spilling out in his shock. Then he corrected himself, his voice dropping to a panicked whisper. "Eliza! What are you doing in Fairfield? I thought you were home with a migraine." "I was," I replied, my voice dangerously calm. "But then my migraine told me to take a drive." "I just followed the pain, Mark, and it led me right to your front porch." He started to step outside, trying to close the door behind him. "Honey, you can't be here." This is a client's house. I'm just waiting for the client. It's complicated." "Complicated?" I took a slow step forward, forcing him back inside. "The only thing complicated here is your felony. I'm not leaving, Mark. Not until I meet your client." He was scrambling now, looking around the pristine living room, desperate to hide the evidence of his second life. His eyes landed on the framed picture of him, Sarah, and Emily on the mantel. Too late. "Who is Sarah, Mark?" I asked, pointing a perfectly manicured finger at the photo. "And who is Emily?" "Your daughter. She looks just like you. I found the pictures, Mark. I found the letters. In the attic. You forgot to toss the shoebox, didn't you?" The color drained from his face. He looked physically ill. The tough engineer facade crumbled instantly. He was just a pathetic caught liar. "Eliza, please, let's talk. Don't do this here. Let's go back home. We can fix this, honey. It's not what you think." "It's exactly what I think, Mark. You married her. You built a life with her. You gave her the daughter I could never give you. You funded 2 families with stolen time and stolen money." I took a breath. I was about to drop the final, most devastating bomb, the one that would ensure his reputation was ruined forever. "I spoke with Miss Vance today. She has all the bank records, the mortgage documents, the wedding photos. I have the lease for your secret P.O. box. The police and the State Bar Association will be receiving everything by tomorrow morning. Your career is over, Mark." He sank onto the sofa, his head in his hands. He didn't try to deny it anymore. He just started begging. "Please, Eliza, please don't call the police. I'll give you everything. The house, the money, everything. Just don't ruin my business. Don't let them find out." "Too late," I said, my voice ice cold. "They already know. And speaking of them." Just then, the front door swung open and in walked Sarah, holding Emily's hand. Emily was chattering happily, a sheet of piano music clutched in her other hand. "We're home, honey!" Emily played Twinkle, Twinkle perfectly. Sarah called out, her voice bright and warm. And then she saw me. The sight of her husband sitting defeated on the couch and a strange woman standing in the middle of her living room silenced her instantly. The sheet music fluttered to the floor. "Mark, who is this?" Sarah asked, her voice quiet but laced with a sudden, sharp fear. I didn't wait for Mark to speak. I looked Sarah dead in the eye, the woman who had unknowingly stolen my life, and delivered the final crushing truth. "Hello, Sarah. My name is Eliza. I am Mark's first wife." The silence that followed my confession was deafening. It hung in the air, heavy with pulverized secrets. Sarah just stood there, clutching her purse strap, her beautiful, kind eyes searching mine, then whipping back to Mark. Little Emily, sensing the terror in the room, buried her face into her mother's skirt. "First wife?" Sarah whispered, her voice barely audible. What does she mean, Mark?" Mark slowly raised his head, his face a mask of utter defeat. He couldn't meet either of our eyes. "Sarah, I can explain. Explain what? Explain why a woman just walked into my house and told me she's your wife. Sarah's voice cracked, moving from confusion to a rising hysterical pitch. Mark, you told me Eliza was your ex-fiancée, a brief mistake from years ago. You said she was just a business associate. The shock was slowly turning into pure, volatile rage. I watched them, cold and detached, a spectator at the end of his self-created world. "Mark, look at me," Sarah screamed, tears streaming down her face. "Did you marry her? Are you still married to her?" He looked up, finally meeting her gaze, his expression contorted with pain. But it was the pain of being caught, not the pain of remorse. "Yes, Sarah. We never divorced. I tried. I fell in love with you." Sarah stumbled back, bumping into the wall. She looked like she'd been stabbed. "You lied to me for 8 years? You let me have your daughter under a lie? We have a mortgage, Mark. We have a life. Was the wedding fake? Was everything a lie?" "The wedding wasn't real, Sarah," I cut in, my voice calm, the perfect contrast to their chaos. "He's a bigamist. Our marriage is legally binding. Yours is not. He lied to a justice of the peace to get that license." Sarah looked from me to Mark, then down at Emily, who was now sobbing uncontrollably, confused by the screaming. That's when the maternal instinct kicked in, overriding the shock. Sarah scooped Emily up, holding her tightly. "Get out," Sarah said, her voice low and dangerous. "Eliza, I don't know who you are, but you need to leave. Mark, you need to leave. Now. I will call the police if you don't both leave my house." "It's not your house, Sarah," I stated flatly. "It's half my husband's, and the other half is tied up in the same illegal mess as the rest of his life. But don't worry, I won't stay. I just came to let you know the truth before the attorneys handle the rest." I looked Mark directly in the eye, my final words to him delivered with chilling precision. "You took 10 years of my life, Mark. I am taking every single asset you have, and the State Bar Association will make sure you never work as an engineer again. Enjoy explaining this to Emily in a few years." I didn't wait for a response. I walked out of that house and didn't look back. I could hear Sarah's muffled sobs and Mark's desperate, pleading voice as the front door slammed shut behind me. I drove straight to the little boutique hotel where he was supposedly on his corporate retreat. I walked into the lobby, found the manager, and quietly told her my story, showing her my marriage license and a copy of the divorce petition I was about to file. I explained that my husband had used their hotel under false pretenses to meet his mistress. I made sure to use that word. And that I would be serving him with papers. By the time I drove home, the manager was dealing with Mark, and I was assured he would be receiving his papers and a very public eviction that very evening. The aftermath was exactly as predicted. The divorce was swift and brutal. Ms. Vance used the bigamy and financial fraud as leverage, ensuring I received over 70% of the joint assets, including the full equity in the renovated Victorian house. Mark's company put him on immediate, indefinite leave pending an internal review of financial conduct, which was corporate speak for firing him over a scandal. His engineering license was suspended. As for Sarah, I never spoke to her again, but I saw the pain in the news reports that followed the divorce filing. Mark couldn't afford the mortgage on the blue house alone, and it was sold 6 months later. Sarah and Emily moved back to her family's town. The last time I saw Mark was in the courtroom. He was gaunt, gray, and broken. He had lost everything. His job, his reputation, his family, and both of his wives, he was alone. I, Eliza Peterson, walked out of that courtroom a wealthy, single woman, finally free from a decade of lies. The house renovation is still ongoing, but now I'm finishing it alone, the way it should have been. It's no longer a monument to a perfect life, but a testament to my survival. I still have the shoebox. I keep it in my study now, not the attic. It's a reminder. Always open the box, no matter how much the label tells you do not open. Because the truth, however ugly, is always better than the dust of a lie.